Okay. Um, where do you get your inspiration for your music?
Music, right. Well, we've covered that a little bit, actually. Is a lot of it is from landscape. It's from the basically the world around us. Um, I do a lot of recording of sound, but I also what else do I do? I, a lot of what I do is based on stories as well, so I get inspiration from stories. So I tend to do a lot of that, and thinking about, well, what are the emotions, if you like? What's the emotional temperature? Do you see what I mean? And how does that change? Because a lot of what I write is theatrical, and it's sort of songs and also incidental music and things like that. So it's tied to a story or it's tied to a scenario. So that's kind of important. But if I'm writing instrumental music, I like to think about what is it, what am I doing, who is it for? Do I get inspired by the people I'm writing for, or what I'm trying to say? And I tend not to just write music in a vacuum. Do you know what I mean? There tends to be either somebody's paying me for it, or I'm really burning to do it. So that's, yeah.
Okay. Do you have a favoured style of music to write?
Kind of, and kind of not. I mean, I've got. I tend to. I tend to think about it as being sort of horses for courses, really. So which means that I write the kind of music that's appropriate for the kind of thing. So, kind of context. So for example, this is going to be a piece of musical theatre. So it's going to have to be singable. It's going to have to tell the story in that sort of way that people are maybe, at least some of it, you know, the way that people are familiar with from different kinds of musical theatre, because I think it's important to kind of the thing about musical theatre is it's very diverse now as well. So it's becoming more difficult to define what musical theatre sounds like, which is kind of exciting, because you can have Sondheim on one hand, and then you've got all the new stuff like dear Evan Hansen and I don't know, Lin-Manuel Miranda's stuff, you know, like In the Heights and Hamilton, and that's really different. So I tend to write different things for different audiences, if you like. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
What got you interested in writing music in the first place?
I started really young. I think I brought up in quite a musical family. My dad was a singer. I mean, officially he worked in the bank, but in his heart, in his head, he's a singer. So he sang everywhere and everything, and used to sing in chapel and all that kind of stuff. And also we did a sort of traditional kind of Welsh singing called Cerdd Dant, where you sing to the accompaniment of a harp, and basically the harp is playing one tune and you're singing another, but they go together in a particular way. So the way it works is you've got a harp tune and you've got a poem, and you can't sing the poem to the harp tune exactly because they don't fit. So what you do is you do something else with it, and somehow magically it does fit. You've got to look it up to see how it works. But basically that's a traditional sort of singing where you have to make up the tune. So you have to compose, and that's one of the ways that I started writing music, was because of that, and harmonising and things like that. And then I went to university and learnt to write music in lots and lots of different ways as well. But started writing songs when I was about 10, so been at it a long time.
Okay. Are there any practitioners or other artists you think impacted or inspired your work specifically?
Yeah, I think Sondheim is an impact in musical theatre. And then outside that, lots of composers, sort of, if you like, classical composers, 20th century composers like Stravinsky, Britten, and Bartók. Further back, there's Dvorak and Smetana, and sort of storytelling composers, Mozart, and all that kind of stuff, the whole classical thing, right? And Bach and J.S. Bach and all of that. But then also Welsh protest singers like David Iwan, which you may not have heard of, and some of the also sort of different bands like that were around when I was growing up, like the Police and Blondie, and loads of other stuff, and folk music and jazz and the blues, and just loads and loads of stuff, really.
Okay. And finally, do you still enjoy composing music
Yes.
as much as you did when you first started?
Yes.
Or have you lost interest slightly, or has it got even more enthusiastic as you've
I
gone
find
on?
it's easier
Hmm.
to produce something with practice. I find I don't worry about it as much anymore. Like, is anything going to come out? Well, I'm not worried about that because basically the way I tend to write is I don't focus on writing the music. I focus on everything else. So today we've looked at maps and we've looked at stories and scenario and all that kind of stuff. And out of all of that mixture comes an urge to write music and an urge to kind of turn that into something else. And eventually it sort of feels like it comes naturally because it comes out of the story. So I find I don't have to try quite as hard as I used to just to get the initial inspiration and to get going. But then with writing music, there's always a lot of sort of donkey work. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's always a lot of boring stuff you have to do, which is either you're writing down the notes or you're writing out the chords, or you're kind of thinking through the arrangement. So there's a lot of detail, and that's what gives you the quality in the work. But I find, it's experience, really. You know, experience counts for a lot.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
No worries.